All right, House of X number 5. Lots of reveals and a lot more questions, which that's exactly what you want from an ongoing series. And this issue had me glued to each page. Not a whole lot of action, but tons of anticipation. So Jonathan Hickman is writing, Pepe Larraz on art, Marte Gracia on colors. Like always, this is a gorgeous book, vibrant, full of life, and Gracia's lights and the purple hues of Krakoa, they really pulled me in this issue specifically, and every scene, the art and the colors, they captured Jonathan Hickman's story in such a great way. Every single bit of it. And the opening line, Lorna says, "Humans, is there any good in them?" And Eric's response is, it's pretty aloof, but he's explaining that humans paved the way to showing us mutants the path to where we are now, to society. Eric mentions that humans were the step from hunting and gathering to forming what we as mutants have now, a Krakoa. And this really captures who Eric is, and I'll mention more about that later, of course. He's my very favorite character in all of comics. His attitude here, Hickman's proper way of characterization, it reminds me of my favorite Nietzsche quote, the way Eric describes the stepping stone that he believes humanity is. Man is a rope, stretched between animal and the Superman, a rope over an abyss. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end. And that's exactly how I think that Eric feels about humanity. And this page, this next one, it gives just a glimpse of that perspective, and it's written perfectly. Look, I know this is getting a little bit philosophical here, but these books are written with a really philosophical perspective in mind, and so I can't help but bring it up. This exposition, it perfectly summarizes this whole book, in fact. Charles and I always wondered what would happen if mutants stopped being hunted, if we didn't have to hide. What would happen when the greatest necessary traits in mutantdom weren't strength and aggressiveness, but intelligence, ingenuity, and creativity? And now, we know. And this is where the 5 are introduced. And these 5, these very unique and special mutants, they're what's introduced in this specific issue. And this is a very similar moment to House of X number 2, where we discover what makes Moira different than we had thought that she was all of these years. That she is a mutant returned to the moment of her birth, memories intact, every time she dies, right into her mother's womb. This isn't quite to that magnitude as far as reveals go, but it's a huge reveal nevertheless. And, having the ability for a story to create such a profound impact like this, again, these characters, so some of these characters in the 5, I'd say a couple, but mostly one, written during Bendis's kind of lackluster X-Men run, to say the least, and, for lack of a better word, throwaway character, specifically Fabio Medina. So, continuing, the 5, as they're adoringly referred to here, they're capable of something absolutely amazing with the help of Professor Xavier. Each one of their powers is actually essential for not only creating life, but for making life become immortal. A life without end, if you can imagine, because I can. So Fabio Medina materializes golden orbs, right? That's his power. And up until now, we didn't know what those orbs were. We've come to find out that they're eggs, unfertilized eggs. And Moira's son, Kevin, he can change the very fabric of reality. So what he does is he shifts those eggs to begin a life cycle within, basically fertilizing themselves, And so in that last issue, we found out about, Nathaniel Essex being used to gather DNA from every mutant, and this is where that DNA comes in. The DNA from each individual, it's injected into the fertilized egg. So if you're following here, and as I think about this, I continue to smile from ear to ear. This is where Eva Bell comes in, and she takes the fertilized egg and creates a time dilation field, right? Speeding up time for the eggs so that they can fully mature to adulthood just very quickly. And the last element, is the element of hope. And I don't just mean that figuratively. However, it certainly does work in this perspective, but I mean Hope Summers, Scott and Jean's daughter. In this case, she's able to create a synergistic effect to assure the absolute success of this process. So this is cool, and it's one of my very favorite topics to just discuss in general about philosophy and being, And the thing is, and it always comes up about TV shows and movies and like in this case, comics, about these issues, What happens at that point? What is the soul? What is the nature of the soul? What is the nature of consciousness? What makes a person when it comes down to it? I could talk about those things all day, but in this story, it's explained that Professor Xavier's cerebro has a second function, and not just finding people in the world, not just being able to see and hear and be anywhere, but it's capable of downloading a backup of every single mutant's consciousness in the entire world into it. And so that completes this process of awakening these hatched empty shells that they call husks to be reborn as the same mutants that they were before, essentially making every mutant immortal. So the story goes on to show that Xavier, explaining that, even though they're technically immortal, a piece of him dies whenever they have to die as well, that he's emotional about it. Just like in a couple issues ago, it ended on that emotional note, when everyone died. We're talking about everyone, Jean, Scott, Logan, everyone that went on that suicide mission. So Aurora puts them each through tests to make sure that it's them. And this is kind of weird. Through the form of a chanting, this group tribal ritual, it really tripped me out, It feels like something's off, right? And you felt it from the beginning, from that very first issue. You're like, this doesn't feel like the X-Men, right? They're different than the ones we know. They're different from the ones of the past. And that grows stronger as the story moves forward. They're all acting weird. So what follows here in the next 3 pages of this, the regular text, the white space, it's a lot of info, and it really reveals a ton about the Xavier's plans, what he wants to achieve, and it's very ambitious. He's talking about working toward resurrecting 16 million dead mutants in around just 10 years' time, using this whole resurrection process. And there's a weird part to this, apparently Kevin McTaggart, by using his reality bending powers, it destroys his body at least once a week, sometimes even daily. He has to be resurrected, and that seems a little dark, right? It gets weirder from there. In my opinion, the way that I read this, it seems as though the 5 they not only get a euphoric feeling from resurrecting mutants, but it's almost as though it makes them more of a collective mind every time. And I know they use the word family, but it felt weird. It feels collectivist. And look, knowing Hickman, a lot more of this is going to be explained later, so it is what it is. The next couple of pages show that the UN passed that resolution to allow Krakoa to be its own nation. So this is the first time that legally mutants have set up their own nation state in this book, But this is another one of those occasions that shows Xavier is not who he used to be. He's having this conversation telepathically with Emma Frost. And he thanks Emma for controlling the delegate's mind in order to pass that resolution. And look, just like that is very out of character for Xavier. It's not out of character for Emma, of course, but this is some truly deceptive, illegal, and actually fascist behavior for Xavier. And so we know something's up now, with Xavier's mind or something. Who knows? A billion questions I have at this point about his behavior and a lot of other things. But look, based upon everything else that Hickman's written, it really is 99% chance that everything he's writing has a purpose. He doesn't have plot holes by the end of a series, so we'll find out. It just nags at me for now, of course, and this scene's a great example of how I want answers now, and I'm not gonna get them, at least not for a while. So that's actually what great writing does, with all of these reveals. This issue, it keeps my curiosity. It's still as high as it was when I started reading this book. And that's great. If you can have a bunch of reveals and questions answered and still have that same curiosity as you walked into it, masterful. And, I'm telling you, I'm really pleased to see that writers in comics are actually still capable of this. Hickman's definitely found a lifelong reader in me now. So next here on Krakoa, you see they're waiting for incoming mutants to the island, right? And Logan doesn't seem too excited for this, to say the very least. And when you see who it is that they're waiting for, when you realize why he feels that way, it's Nathaniel Essex, the Marauders, Paris Bennett, Exodus, and In Sabah Nur himself. And God, I love this page. Or, excuse me, Apocalypse. I love this page. So Logan wants to know if all of this is going to be a problem. And Apocalypse explains that finally the X-Men are strong and they embody everything he proclaims to be mighty. Might is right. Death to the weakling, wealth to the strong. And, the craziest thing ever, if you're an X-Men fan, this last page, this powerful image, as far as I'm concerned, I have solidified the fact that something very strange is going on with the X-Men as Charles Xavier shakes the hand of Apocalypse and welcomes him home. And I got a little bit of a chill up my spine when I saw that page this afternoon, and I'll say this, just like every week, I'm excited to see what happens in this series. Look, this is absolutely the best thing happening in comics right now. So here's my little bit of TMI for the day. It's all about, well, here, I'll get into some personal stuff like I was kind of mentioning that I was going to say about Magneto as well. So I challenge you to simply go out about your day, ask this question to individuals that you encounter. Do you want to live forever? Now, I guarantee that the people that you find that say yes, definitively, I want to live forever, those people, at the very most, they're only going to be about 1 out of every 10 people. Generally speaking, only 1 out of every 20 people will absolutely say yes, definitively, I want to live eternally here, So one of my favorite shows, in fact, it's actually my favorite show by Joss Whedon, was Dollhouse. I don't know if you've seen that. It actually has a negative depiction of this whole process of, downloading your consciousness into another vessel, uploading it, waiting for that moment to where you can put it inside. Of course, they didn't deal with the whole issue of creating a clone to be able to do that. But they depicted it in a negative way, talking about all the bad things that could occur from it. But here's what I'm wondering. why don't people talk about the positive things with the coming technology? Because a lot of these things, they're coming whether people would like to believe it or not. So I'm a life extensionist, and based on current research and data, and all the evidence points to the possibility that we may be able to not only add thousands of years to our lives in the very near future, but also possibly be able to do exactly that, mapping out the human brain in order to create a vessel capable of transferring that consciousness to and from those vessels. So I'm one of those very few people in the world who has actually obtained a cryonics contract. If my body was to die today, I would be flown across country to be frozen in cryogenesis. And that's in the hope, again, not the Hope Summers, but in the hope that science catches up to be revived in the very near future. So on file at that medical facility, I have also archived files of my DNA and a full written life's account, digital and written, of what has occurred throughout my entire life. Written to each specific emotional detail to the absolute best of my ability. You can see where I'm going with this. Possibly that those same things, being able to take one's consciousness and transfer it to and from a vessel. So this issue of House of X is absolutely the issue that I have been waiting to read. And although it wasn't a huge emotional issue for me, it was definitely intriguing from my perspective. The idea that man may not be an end of the rope, that man dangles from the middle of this bridge between Beast and immortal Superman. Well, let's just say this. I have a really good reason why I have Magneto's Holocaust tattoo on my arm. You are the gateway into comics.